Hi, welcome to my channel where I discuss everything I love about my favorite books. Today, I would like to talk to you about my experience reading A Game of Thrones for the first time. I haven't seen the show either, so this is basically my first experience of the world of A Song of Ice and Fire. I do have some preconceived notions based on the memes and some articles and headlines that I just could not avoid from showing up in my social media feed while the show was ongoing. So I had some expectations, most of which turned out to be wrong, interestingly. But I knew the fate of some characters, like primarily Eddard Stark. I think I knew what was going to happen to him, or at least what his fate was going to be, not specifically how he would, how his arc would end, let's say. By the way, I'm going to be talking about this with full spoilers, so if you haven't read the book or watched the show, consider yourself warned. Now, so there were a lot of characters that I expected to not like, whom I ended up liking a lot more, and vice versa. There were characters that I expected to like, whom I'm mostly lukewarm on so far. I really liked Martin's writing style in the book. I thought his descriptions were very beautiful and vivid. A lot of times I felt like I was there in Winterfell. I felt the cold whenever we were by the wall, and he does write the dread and horror from the first chapter that really carried throughout the book. There aren't a lot of instances when the others are mentioned or discussed, or when characters talk about explorations beyond the wall. But when they do, the sense of dread that we felt in the first chapter, for me, that really carried throughout the book. For how little that was mentioned, I thought, the descriptions and the writing, I think, was very evocative in that sense. I also really enjoyed reading every single point of view. There are some characters that I really disliked and did not like being in their head. Hello, Sansa. But overall, I think there wasn't a single POV that I did not enjoy reading. And all the characters had very distinctive voices as well. I think there were, 7 distinct POVs in this book, and each one had a distinctive voice, and I felt like I was reading a different person each time. They did not feel at all like they blended together. So yeah, I'm really enjoying Martin's writing style, and I can see what all the hype is about, I guess. This book for me felt mostly like a slow build. I did not feel the urge to binge read at any point, and I think that's a little bit on how I tend to read multi-POV stories. There are some characters that I like reading more than others, and that always happens in a multi-POV story, and I'm sure that's true of everyone. But when there are large sections that I'm really enjoying following characters that I like one after the other, and then we suddenly get to a character whom I like following a little bit less, I tend to want to take a break before I come back, and this time I know what to expect, so I'll pick up from where I left off and then enjoy it just the same. So for that reason, I did not feel the urge to binge read this book. I took it very slowly. I read it over the course of 3 or 4 weeks. And even a lot of the actual plot and the build-up of events, none of it felt urgent enough that I felt eager to find out what happened next. There was a bit of a build-up towards the end where I felt like that, and I think I read the last 100-200 pages in a day, but until then I was reading maybe 30-40 pages at a time at most. The way I want to structure the rest of this video is to maybe go over each POV character and discuss a little bit of my impressions with them, and maybe for those that do not have horrible ends, discuss a little bit about what I'm looking forward to reading about in the next books. So we'll start with Bran, because I think that's the first point of view we get after the prologue, if I remember correctly. And that was really interesting to go from this complete sense of dread that built up in the prologue to this sense of wonder and awe that Bran has in like the child's perspective. That was a really interesting switch, and I immediately fell in love with Bran's character. I think I sort of imprinted on him because he's the first POV right after the prologue. Now, I loved Bran's sense of wonder and joy in life, and how much he loved exploring Winterfell and climbing the buildings and so on. I loved reading all of that. I loved his relationship with his wolf, and his relationship with Hodor eventually when that happens. So I think the sense of joy and wonder that we have, that we get to appreciate through Bran, makes it that much more horrible when bad things happen to him, when he ultimately crashes and loses his ability to walk. I found myself feeling really sorry for him and wishing so hard that the events before did not happen. But I also really love how he copes from that. He knows that he can probably never become a knight, maybe. He still holds out hope for that. But as soon as he gets a little bit of hope, with, Tyrion showing him how to saddle a horse so that he can still ride horses, I think as soon as he has that little bit of access to his previous life, he starts to find joy again in life, and I love that for his character. He still has his moments of sadness where he is ruining all that he's lost, but for the most part he finds his sense of amazement again. So I really loved reading Bran's perspective throughout the book. And I'm also eager because I think towards the end we started exploring a little bit about magic, and Bran keeps having these dreams about flying and the crows or ravens that talk to him, I forget which. But I'm eager to see if Bran ends up exploring magic, and with the help of the viling person who attacked him before. So I am very excited for Bran's plot later, and I hope he does find more magic one way or the other, whether real or just more magic in life. I am eager for his plot line. Probably maybe the second best for me after Dany, who's probably my favorite of these all. And now Eddard Stark, he is a man of honor. I always like reading characters with a sense of honor and who have this strong moral compass that drives them to do the right thing. But I always love the conflict when they are forced to make tough decisions that that they have to wrestle with, because they have to think hard about what's right and what's wrong. And I also like when they make compromises on their sense of morality to get to the right thing. I think Eddard Stark was maybe missing that part. He had this strong moral compass and he did what he thought was right always, and well, that got him into trouble. This man, his house symbol is a direwolf, but when he went to King's Landing, he was a puppy thrown into a den of wolves. He was supposed to be the biggest, baddest wolf there, but he got eaten alive. And yeah, I don't think I saw anything different happening when he trusted from the beginning. I think as the reader, we know, I don't know if I felt this more because I know that he's going to die a horrible death. I did not think that he should have trusted Littlefinger or Varys. He never once questioned their motives. He just trusted them implicitly based on what he told them, to the point where, he just is too trusting. Yeah, I think this was a situation where a man of honor should probably have dealt with things differently, at least protected himself and his family a lot better, and that just did not happen. I was very sad to see him go, but I was expecting it, so maybe I did not feel it as much. I think I felt his death more on the behalf of other characters than I did because I loved and missed him so much. So, but I did really appreciate his character. He is the one shining light that has this unwavering moral compass. And maybe Jon Snow is another one of those, but all of the others have something about them that I don't necessarily like. This was one man about whom I can say, well, actually that's not necessarily true, is it? I think, now I think about it, every time he thought about his children and who he'll miss back home, he always leaves out Jon Snow when he's thinking about his children, who he left behind. And I guess we're moving on to Jon Snow now, starting from there. But yes, Jon Snow, again, he's pretty reflective of Eddard Stark and his sense of morality and honor, I think. I love his arc where he makes friends of all the people on the wall, and he becomes almost this implicit leader for people of his class. And and I love that arc for him. I love that he ultimately becomes this important person, and he finds a family, like he finds a way to fulfill his yearning to be accepted by his family, although that void is still there. I think I really felt that. I thought all of that was really well done for Jon Snow. And honestly, for all that, this was a character that I expected to like a lot, but I'm mostly neutral. Like, I appreciate the character, but I don't necessarily have strong feelings towards him. Now, I did feel very bad for him at various points, like not necessarily during his POV, but when we are in Caitlyn and Eddard's point of view, and sometimes in Sansa and Arya's point of view. I love Arya and Jon Snow's relationship. I love that so much, and I really like that they the outcasts all relate to each other. Like, Jon is sort of the magnet that people who feel somewhat outcast can relate to, like Tyrion Lannister, for instance, and Arya. He has a really good relationship with them, and I'd love to see where that goes. But yes, coming back to what I was saying earlier about Eddard and Caitlyn's perspectives when they are thinking about Jon Snow. Caitlyn, I wish she wouldn't blame Jon for Eddard's indiscretions, but I don't necessarily blame her. Like, yeah, that's how he's a reminder of her husband's infidelity. So yeah, absolutely, I guess wherever she needs to direct that hate, although, a more mature person might direct that hatred at the husband instead of the child who had nothing to say in the whole matter. But I really did not like that every time Eddard thought about his children back home, he never thought about Jon. And that really deepened my feelings of sadness or commiseration with Jon. So I loved that what you can see about other characters from various POVs adds to the depth and understanding of those characters, like of the characters whose POV we are not in. And for me, Arya's, Eddard's, and Caitlyn's POVs really added several layers to my understanding of Jon. And I appreciated that quite a bit. And Caitlyn, yeah, I love that she's a go-getter. She makes decisions. She doesn't spend too long lingering on things that she cannot change. The moment when she finds out about her husband's death, or I think we don't read the exact moment, it's a few days later, I believe, when we are back in her POV, and she mourns him, but she also knows she can't spend too long doing that. She needs to move on and make sure that her son and the rest of her family is safe. I think I like that she knows when to compromise, when to kneel, and when to go out fighting, and she's trying to advise her son to do the same. I love the conflict of trying to advise her son and also not feel like she's the one looming and make him look like he's not in charge. So yeah, I love reading Caitlyn's perspective as well. And Tyrion, Arya, some of my favorites. I think Tyrion had a lot of funny perspectives, and I loved being in his point of view. I am a little of the way into A Clash of Kings. Tyrion wasn't necessarily my favorite while I was reading this book, but he's becoming one as I read A Clash of Kings. It feels like he will make decisions, unpalatable decisions, without really feeling too bad about it, because he's a man who's learned to survive in a hostile world, because he's had to deal with hatred and othering his entire life. So yeah, I think he tries to stay straight as long as he manages it, as long as he can manage it, but if he needs to, he'll go off track. I think in the beginning I was on Caitlyn's side, and eventually I ended up being on Tyrion's side a lot more, or at least I think they were more or less neutral, like they were more or less equal for me towards the end. So I really like that switch in perspective that I had. And yes, Arya also I loved very much. I loved her whole sequence with trying to be a water dancer. Is that what that was? But yeah, I love that Eddard Stark did not stop her from knew that she wouldn't just stop if he locked her up. So instead he decided to give her safe lessons in sword fighting, and she gets good at it. I love reading the child's perspective there again. I think Arya has a similar sense of wonder as Bran does, but she's she feels wonder about different things than Bran. So I loved reading both the children perspectives. Sansa, I disliked with a fierce intensity. I hated every time we were in her POV. I've read enough Malazan that I know not to judge a character right away, so I will reserve judgment. I will leave scope to switch my opinion of her, but so far detest her with a fierce hatred. Now, and I guess finally Dany, I think she is my favorite perspective to follow, and I love that she starts out as this helpless girl and she ends as a woman in this book, as a woman who's taking charge and making her own path in life. And she is again another character who's had to deal with a hostile world, and she was this helpless victim of her brother's ambitions in the beginning. And we actually see the shift, like there is a slow build up to how she becomes this woman who can take charge. She's like, she keeps exploring, I guess, the extent of her power at various points, and eventually she realizes what she can do and she takes power. I think she's the character that I'm most eager to follow. I had thought, because I tried to figure this out just by flipping through the book, and apparently I didn't do a good job, but I thought A Clash of Kings did not have any Daenerys perspective, but it turned out happily that I am very wrong about that. So yes, I am extremely excited to see what she does with the dragons. I think this is the perspective I'm most excited to follow. This was the one that I enjoyed reading the most as a woman, as a strong female character who literally goes from being helpless and a victim to someone who's in total control of her fate, or someone who wants to be and is now trying everything she can to be in control of her own future. Now, some other stuff that I liked that aren't necessarily just tied to character. I loved the dire wolves that the kids all get, and their wonderful relationships with their wolves. I think the death of Lady and the loss of Nymeria, I think some of the most heartbreaking moments for me. I think that honestly was on the level that Eddard Stark's death was for me. The creeping dread that I mentioned in the prologue with the others, and how it finally comes around in the little fight with Jon Snow and the commander, Lord Mormont, is he? I forget his name, but yeah, the final fight between Jon Snow and the two of their watch who have now become the others. I think that's what happened, or I don't know if they got infected some other way. They're like zombies, right? So anyway, that part was very interesting, and I'm eager to see what happens with that. I loved the mythology and the lore. Martin didn't harp on it at any point. We just got like glimpses of the mythology of the world, the gods, and I guess the wildlings' beliefs about a lot of the, I guess, fantastical creatures of this world that people don't necessarily believe in at this point. The mythology that the wildlings seem to have built about the world, that is very interesting. So the others were considered a myth, but they turned out to exist. So it makes you wonder what else in the wildlings lore of the world exists in reality. And I am really interested to see how many of them actually make an appearance in the future books. This also is tied to my eagerness to figure out if Bran will ultimately end up exploring magic. It seems like magic was real in this world at some point. I believe, if I remember correctly, someone tells Bran that there were powerful wizards or mages in the past. And so there is hope that Bran will ultimately be able to use magic, probably. But even if that doesn't happen, I'm eager to figure out what other kinds of magic there might be in this world. I really like the Maesters and how their knowledge is built. I love the little detail that their chains are forged when they learn a new field or a new subject and master it. They get a new link in their chain. I just love that detail for some reason. Oh, I would like to talk a little bit about Khal Drogo and how he died. I think I don't remember her name, so we'll call her the medicine woman. The medicine woman that Dany trusted in so much. I think that reminded me a lot about Eddard Stark. The way he trusted people without thinking too much about whether he should. Dany's trust of this medicine woman felt to be along the same lines, and she also had the same naivete that Eddard Stark had about maybe people sharing the sense of honor that they had. And to be fair, I think Dany's expectations were off in this regard, because even though she saved the woman from being raped, her people had, after all, invaded their village and destroyed everyone she loved. So trusting her that much, I think, was just silly. But I suppose the difference between Dany and Eddard is that she had a chance to regroup and do things differently. Eddard did not have the chance, and honestly, I don't know if he would do things differently, if he would stop being so trusting where he shouldn't be. So yeah, that was all about my experience reading A Game of Thrones. If you're still here and listening, thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next one. Bye.